Hey, what's going on everyone? In today's video, I'm going to be showing you how to create this awesome animated lava lamp with this liquid effect. In this tutorial, I'll be walking you through the entire process, from drawing our components out in Illustrator, to importing and animating them in After Effects. Alright, so this is the shape we're going to be creating here in Illustrator and animating in After Effects. Let's go ahead and get started. Click here on the Home button, then select Create New. We're going to name this Components. And let's also make sure our artboard is set to 1920 by 1080 pixels, and let's select Create. Awesome, so the first thing we're going to do is click and hold on our Shape tool, and make sure to select the Polygon tool. We can draw out our polygon right here in the middle, and make sure to hold shift as you drag this out to make it proportional. We're also going to get rid of our stroke and give it a nice bright color. You can pick any colors for this part. We're going to be changing these later on. Next, I'm going to hit A on my keyboard to bring up my direct selection tool, and I'm going to highlight these top 2 points. Holding shift and using the arrow key, I'm going to bring these points up near the top, right around here. Next, I'm going to grab all of these points and bring them down near the bottom using the shift and arrow keys. And we can actually bring these center points back up just a little. Let's highlight the points on this right side and bring them in a little as well. I'm also going to tweak the top 2 points again and bring them in near the center. And again, we're just highlighting these points with our direct selection tool and using our arrow keys to move them around. Next, what we want to do is round out these corners quite a bit. So I'm going to hit P on my keyboard to bring up the pen tool. And I'm going to put a point here, and holding shift, I can draw a straight line out to the other side. Let's also change its stroke color so it's a little more visible. We're just using this line for reference. Select our shape and hit Shift C on the keyboard to bring up our anchor point tool. Click and drag this point out until we reach the line we just drew. We're going to do the same thing on the other side to match the curve. When we're done, we can just delete this line. I'm going to hit A on the keyboard to bring up my direct selection tool again, and I'm actually going to nudge these edge points in a little more. If we hit A again, we can also use this tool to round out the rest of our corners a little bit. And we're just moving this slightly. Now that we have this drawn out, I'm going to hit M on my keyboard to bring up the rectangle tool, and I'm going to draw out a perfect square right here, holding shift as I drag out my shape. Make sure to deselect it, then let's hit P on our keyboard to bring up our pen tool, and let's use this rectangle to draw a nice even triangle. Let's hit V and bring our shape right below the lava lamp using our smart guides to center it up. Then we can just drag this top part up quite a bit. I'm also going to drag out both sides of my triangle by holding the Option key as I adjust it. Somewhere right around here looks good. Next, I'm going to hit L on my keyboard to bring up the ellipse tool, and let's go to the center of our triangle. Click and drag out your ellipse while holding the Option key to have it expand from the center. Let's bring it out to the edge like this. Also, cool little tip, if you hit Command 0 on your keyboard, that brings us back to full screen. Let's highlight all of our shapes now that we're happy with them and hit Shift M to combine them. If I scribble across all our shapes, you can see they start to combine into one. Let's use the Align tab to center this with our artboard, and if you don't see this, go ahead and click on Window and make sure Align is selected. Next, we're going to define the bounds of where our lava will be moving around. Let's hit P on our keyboard to bring up the pen tool, and let's draw a line straight across the top here. If we hit P again, that closes off our line. Let's draw another line directly across our shape right around here. Grab both of your lines by holding shift as we select, and make sure they have a visible stroke so we can see what we're working with. Next, I'm going to highlight all of my objects and select the lava lamp one more time to reference it. Then, using the Align panel, let's make sure everything is nice and centered. Let's hit plus on our keyboard, and that's going to allow us to add an anchor point right in the center of our line. Let's also hit A on our keyboard and use our shift and arrow keys to move this point up by one click. Let's hit Shift C to bring up the tool to round out these corners. Remember, we can also hold shift as we drag to make a straight line. Awesome, let's do the same for our bottom line. Hit plus on your keyboard to add a point right in the center. Then hit A on your keyboard and use the arrow key to bring this point down slightly. Again, let's hit Shift C and round out this corner. Awesome, so next let's select all of our items and drag them out to the side. Also make sure to hold the Shift and Option keys. This is going to duplicate our object while also dragging it directly to the right. Now we can delete these lines over here since we won't be needing them anymore. Let's highlight these shapes again, and this time we're going to hit Shift M and scribble around inside here to separate the middle section into its own shape. Then we can give it its own fill, and again, the color doesn't really matter since we're going to be changing it later. Select our new shape, hold Shift and select our original lava lamp, then let's click on our lava lamp one more time to reference it, and we'll go ahead and center our shapes. We can delete all of this excess over here. Now that our shape is done, let's go ahead and prep this for After Effects by separating all of our shapes into their own layers. Again, if you don't see this tab, go to Window and select Layers. Since we only have 2 shapes, we only need 2 layers. So let's click here to add a new layer. Double click on it and let's rename this to Overlay. Then I'm just going to drag my shape into this new layer. Let's also rename this one to, let's do Lamp. Now, the reason we separate our shapes into their own layers is so that when we import this into After Effects, the program recognizes these as their own shapes that can be animated separately. Let's go ahead and hit Command S to save our file, which we should have done in the beginning, and let's save it somewhere easy like our desktop. Awesome, let's go ahead and jump into After Effects and get started with the animation. Alright, so the first thing we're going to do is select New Project. Then let's go over to our project panel, double click and go to Import File, and then we're just going to grab our Illustrator file and hit Open. Make sure it's set to Composition and Layer Size, then hit OK. Next, I'm going to drag in my color palette, which you can download from the link in the description, but I encourage you to use your own colors. Let's double click on our components layer to open it up. As you can see, we have both of our individual shapes. Let's highlight both layers, double click, go to Create and create shapes from Vector Layer. Without deselecting anything, let's double click one more time and go to Pre-Compose. And let's name this Lava Lamp. Now we can double click here to open up our new composition and go ahead and close out this Components tab if you want. Alright, since we're going to be applying our lava to this overlay, let's go ahead and pre-compose it one more time and rename it to Lava. Let's double click to open up this new composition, and this is where we're going to be creating our shapes for our lava. Let's hit Q on our keyboard a few times until we cycle through to the ellipse tool. We're going to draw out 6 or 7 decently sized blobs right on top of our overlay. Let's also make sure to deselect after each blob to make sure they're in their own layers. These don't have to be proportional, and don't worry if they overlap or spill over the edges a little bit. Try to give some variance in their size, but make sure that none of them are too small because the effect we're going to apply cuts some of the edges off of these blobs. Alright, so there's 7 blobs that we drew out. We can also use our arrow keys to nudge these over a little. It's okay if they're touching, but try to spread them out evenly. Awesome, let's hit Command A to select all of our shapes and hit U to collapse our layers to make it look a little cleaner. Next, let's select all of our circles and click this Pan Behind tool once. Then hold Command and double click on the same button. This will move the anchor points to the center of all our shapes. Now that our anchor points are set to the middle, we can actually double click on the shapes to rotate them and even adjust their size a little if we wanted to. Cool, let's go ahead and highlight all of our blobs and hit P on our keyboard to bring up the position animator. With all our shapes selected, let's go ahead and turn on this position stopwatch to put a keyframe right at the beginning. Now, I want this to be an 8-second animation, so I'm going to jump ahead to 8 seconds and let's go ahead and move each of these shapes around to about where we want them to end. For example, I'm going to move this blob directly to the left, but I'm also going to grab this little pin right here and adjust the curve that our blob follows. We can do the same thing for this blob. I'm just going to drag it out to the right and again adjust this little pin here to change the curve that it follows. We can go ahead and do this for all of our shapes, and keep in mind that the further the shape moves, the faster it will appear to move when we play back. Don't be afraid to make this look exciting, and it's totally okay if some of our blobs spill over the edge. You might even want to watch how a real lava lamp moves if you're looking to make this spot on. Now, if I play through this, you can see it's already come into life a little, but it still doesn't have that liquid style. Again, if we highlight everything and hit U on our keyboard, we can collapse all of our layers. Let's go ahead and select our bottom blob and come over to the effects and presets. We're going to search for an effect called Turbulent Displace. Let's drop this onto our bottom blob, and you can see it already takes effect by warping our shape a little. Let's increase the amount to 65, which is going to change the amount of displacement and distortion that we see. Feel free to change this number if you think something else looks better. Now if we select our turbulent displace effect and hit Command C to copy, we can select all our other shapes and hit Command V to paste this effect. As we move this around, you can see that we get a lot more variation in size and movement. Next, we're going to be making a border around our shape, and this might not make sense immediately, but you'll see why this is important later on. Let's zoom in a little and hit G on our keyboard to bring up the pen tool. We are going to be switching between G, our pen tool, and H, our hand tool, which is going to allow us to move around. Let's outline our shape and try to stay as close to the edge as possible without actually overlapping with it. This definitely doesn't need to look clean at all, we just need a shape around the border. Without deselecting, we can draw a border around the other edges, which will make sure they're all in the same layer. Again, we can use H, our hand tool, to move around, and G to bring my pen tool back up. I'll go ahead and speed things up through this. Now that all of our shapes are drawn out, I'm going to bring in my color palette and drop it right into my preview. Let's also rename this to border just so we can stay organized. Holding shift, we can select all of our shapes except the overlay, and let's change our fill by clicking on this eyedropper and going over to our pink color. Let's grab everything except the overlay and pre-compose it one last time. We're going to name this Liquify Effect. Sorry, I'm actually going to bring back my color palette just to change our overlay color. Let's make it this pink color again, then select a darker shade directly beneath it. Let's turn off this layer. Double click into our new layer to open it up. What we want to do is apply an effect to all of our shapes that's going to help them morph together as they get close. So let's double click on our timeline and go to New, and let's grab an adjustment layer. We can hit Enter on our keyboard to rename this to Liquify Effect. Basically, we're going to be adding our effects to this layer, that way everything underneath the layer is affected. Let's go up to our effects and presets and search for Radial Fast Blur, and go ahead and drop that on our adjustment layer. Now if we scroll through, you can see this definitely isn't the look we're going for. Let's go back to our effects and presets and search for a simple choker and drag that onto our adjustment layer. Now if we come over to this effects tab, we can change our blur amount to 25, and let's make sure that our simple choker is set to the same number. This looks much better, and hopefully you can see why we needed our border. As our shapes get close to the edge, they also morph with it. Keep in mind that once you apply this effect, it becomes pretty render intensive. If we go back to our lava composition, you can see that the effects trim the edges off of our shapes a little. So what we can do is select our Liquify effect layer and click S on our keyboard to make it a little smaller and better fitting. Let's bring this down to about 95 or so. Next, we're going to make sure to toggle this button to preserve the underlying transparency, and boom, that's starting to look like an actual lava lamp. This basically applies our Liquify layer only on top of the overlay and hides everything else. Let's go back to our lava lamp composition and bring out our color palette. We can change our lamp to this nice black color. Now, this might be a great stopping point for you if you're only looking for a 2D lava lamp, but we're actually going to push this design further to give it a little more depth and realism. Let's go back into our Liquify effect layer and let's go ahead and select our bottom shape layer. Let's search in our effects and presets for glow, and we can drop this right on our layer. We're going to make sure to change our glow radius to 100, and that looks pretty good right there. Let's select our glow effect and hit Command C to copy. Using Shift, we can select all our layers and hit Command V to paste our effect. The glow effect manipulates the color near the edges of the blobs and also gives it a slight neon look. Going back into our main composition, we can see how this looks. Again, this is very render intensive, so it might take a while to play back. Let's hit Q until we cycle through to our rectangle tool, and let's draw out a rectangle right here. Let's select our layer, hit enter, and rename it to wall, and move it to the bottom of our timeline. Now we can search for an effect called gradient ramp and drop it right on our layer. Let's go ahead and change it from a linear ramp to a radial ramp. Then we're going to select the start of our ramp and move it behind our lava lamp. Then grab the end of the ramp and move it near the edge of our preview. We can use this eyedropper to change the start of our ramp to our pink color and change the end of our ramp to this deep purple color. You might notice some banding throughout this gradient, and the way we can get rid of this is by increasing our ramp scatter quite a bit. This is basically going to blur our colors together a little better and make it harder to see the banding. We can go ahead and turn off our color reference too. Let's make our floor by duplicating our wall layer by hitting Command D on your keyboard. Let's hit enter and rename this to floor. We can bring this below our wall layer and make sure to toggle our modes until we see the 3D option. Then we can click to make this a 3D layer. Now if we hit R on our keyboard to bring up our rotation, you can see we have 3 axes that we can use to rotate our shape. We're only going to be changing the X orientation in the negative direction to about -82. Now we can select our floor, hold shift and use the arrow keys to bring this down to about right here. We can grab the end of our ramp and bring it in just a little, maybe to about halfway. Now we still have this hard line right across the center of our preview and that doesn't look too good. We can come to our effects and presets and search for a Gaussian blur. And let's apply this to our wall layer. If we bring this up to around 40 or 45, it's going to make our edge look a lot better. This looks almost perfect, but we can add one more quick thing to tie the look together really well. If this was a real lava lamp, you'd imagine that some of the light would be shining onto the lamp itself. So that's what we're going to make. Let's grab our lamp outlines and hit Command D to duplicate it. Let's bring back our color palette and we're going to change this fill to a darker shade of our pink by using the eyedropper, then selecting a shade directly beneath it. Next, hit Q on your keyboard until you get to the ellipse tool, then we're going to select our button that says Tool Creates Mask. Come to the middle of our lava area and drag out an ellipse while also holding down on the command key. You can click on the mask in the timeline and use the arrow keys to adjust its position. You want it to be slightly on the top and bottom of our lamp. Without deselecting it, hit F on your keyboard to bring up the mask feather and let's bring it up until it looks good. Now if we play through, we get our finished design. Alright, and there we have it. That's how you can create this awesome animated lava lamp using this liquidy drippy effect. Hopefully you learned something new from this video that you can take and apply in your own designs. I hope you found this video helpful, and if you did, don't forget to like and subscribe. It really does make a difference. If you have any questions, drop a comment below, and as always, I'll see you in the next video.